Hello and welcome to InformNation, where knowledge is not information until it's shared. I'm your host, Aixa Rodriguez. Today in the studio, we are excited to welcome Obed Figueroa, Director of Recruitment and Admissions at Martin Luther School in Queens, and also author of this lovely book. Marcus learns about the differences, different types of doctors. Okay, very good. This is a rare book. I've never seen something like this. It's got me really excited. So, for Mr. Figueroa, Obed. Obed is good. Perfect.
Yeah.
This got me really interested. I was interested. Where would you have gotten this idea? But obviously, you must have a whole story to your career to get you to this point, where
Yes.
now you're contributing to resources for our young people to
Yes.
talk about careers in STEM. So
Yes.
what's your background professionally?
Thank you for having me here. And so my background is in education, higher education. And so I started off with opening up undergraduate schools in the city in Brooklyn, Brownsville and Bed-Stuy. And then I started helping Touro University opening up medical schools in New York City and Harlem. And so I come with the reference of the undergrad and graduate student, and obviously a heavy background in health sciences. My master's is also in higher education administration from Stony Brook. So I walk with all of that. I walk with several hundred stories of students that have, excuse me, that have interviewed with me, just sharing about themselves and what their walk was. It's always touched me. In particularly, love the privileged, but also in particular the non-traditional student. What was their walk? How did they get inspired? And particularly if they come from where I'm from.
What was their pathway to medicine?
Yes, yes. How did they stay focused? What were their challenges? How did they navigate? So literally reading all those essays and then listening to their stories during an interview, making the decision to accept or not, as I was in charge of that with the committee. It's touched me, it's moved me, and I have a dedication page to them because I wanted to let them know I was listening and always thinking, how can I help?
So your inspiration is from actually the real people who are becoming doctors.
Yes, and have been, yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty real.
Yeah.
Right? Definitely straight up exactly their feelings of walking into a whole new career path, maybe never having a role model prior to that. Any other inspiration for this book?
It's also from my own experience. Being born in the Bronx, growing up in Bronx and Queens, and there was no father presence. So it was me and my mother, Latina, and trying to figure out how to survive, how to survive in that space in the Bronx. And how she inspired me and how she kept me focused, very old school traditions. And me trying to figure out how do I navigate. So not having going into the sciences, but just being that person, okay, I don't have a father around, how do I figure out? How do I stay focused?
So your own personal story is the vehicle, the inspiration from real students. The art in this book, where did you get this idea of being able to do it in this way? How did you come up with this?
Yeah, very intentional, very intentional. So forgive me for not knowing the illustrator's name, because I definitely can get that from the publisher. So the publisher's team of illustrators are the ones, Austin McCauley provided their own illustrators. So I always was in contact with them, making sure they did it just right, make sure they got our hues correct. Because it's
we should talk about that more. Keep going.
But significant, because we're not just one shade, we're multiple shades. So they're really good, and I was intentional, and I wanted to illustrate practitioners in practice, because I wanted the kids to see, as we talk about a dentist or a podiatrist, I wanted them to see the person in action so that they can conceptualize that's what they do. So going beyond just the content for this age reader, second, third grade, the visuals are really important. And I think they nailed it. I think they did a good job.
Yeah, it's refreshing to actually see what you were talking about, which is all of our hues that we come into. Could you talk a little bit more about representation and your goals as they went through the process of bringing this book to life?
So, in particular, anyone who knows me knows that I'm passionate about inclusion. It's been part of my research and part of my work experience, right? Speaking to that. And so, in particular, for the sciences, doing my research publications, my information, because I had to make sure it was research-based, right? It came from the American Association of Medical Colleges, the AAMC. And clearly, you know, when I did my first paper in 2014 to this date, shows the low representation of color within that space. And so it's a very competitive space as well, and there's lots of barriers and obstacles and navigating you have to do. It's competitive, right? So, and it's not a free experience, so you have to have money to even get into the game.
A lot
So,
of institutional
all of
obstacles.
that, all of that. And then your foundation has to be built up in such a way to be competitive in the sciences, right? So some of us may not have that, right? And many of us do have it, so you know, blessings to them. But I'm really speaking to the issue at hand is the low representation. How do we create that shift? So the AAMC shows the single-digit representation, and they're making efforts. They're making efforts in trying to push a change in that, and I can speak to how they're doing that. But I'm seeing those numbers, and I'm in the experience of managing the enrollment, and you're seeing it even lower number, single digits, when you go into practice. And so I thought to myself, well, what's going on within the space? I'm listening to the stories, I'm seeing the situations, I'm going to medical conferences in the past, and I'd be the only representation, you know, and it's
Not
like
easy to be in a room where you're the only one.
yeah. So that only one syndrome, right? Like, and so me and many others have been on the ground, you know, being the soldiers. Like, how do we influence? How do we create this shift? How do we tell the young people earlier? Hence the book. I wanted to make sure that the conversation is starting much, much earlier than high school. Like dropping those seeds, first grade, second grade, third grade, where we can, you know, spark the conversation and you know, show them this is how you build. Start building at the earlier age. That's really what the intention is. And so I'm really pleased to see it come to fruition.
Yeah, this is great. We were looking at, a couple of friends of mine were looking for books in particular that focused on career paths and exploration. But for the lower grades, it's hard to find them. Some of them are very too simplistic, and they also don't represent us all, which is very clear. You end up seeing an association which whoever is being depicted as a doctor or depicted as an artist or depicted as a teacher, students seem to internalize. Like, I can't be that because I don't ever see someone who looks like me.
We can relate. We can relate to that experience. Even in going into clinics, you know, in urban areas, I'm reflecting on my own, and that being in the Bronx, right? Like, you would think, we're not talking, you know, some out west place. We're talking about in urban cities. And it was hard to find someone of color that looked like you. My experience wasn't bad, but I'm just making a point, or we are making a point of seeing more of us being represented. So in the poor areas, in my experience, I would see other ethnic groups, love them to death. You know, I'm all about inclusion, but it would have been nice to have been more influenced with people that look like us, for sure.
There's an aspect of cultural competency that also is part of representation that doesn't often get discussed. But needs to be dug out about this. We understand what we eat. So if we're going to be recommending diet changes and giving advice for diabetes and giving advice for heart disease, you don't know the cultural palette or the cultural background of our foods and our heritage. It's hard to be very specific. It's hard to ask probing questions.
That's huge what you just said. It's huge, and I can't overemphasize it. And that's in my research that I speak to this, and it's proven. It's backed up by research, the points that you make. And so, you know, they have seen better, I'm trying to remember the terms that from the research, better patient responses, more receptive to treatment when they are speaking with a practitioner that can relate to their culture. Not just by someone who has read about their culture, but someone that can relate to it, that have lived their culture experience. It is extremely significant. And we have the research also shows that those of color that do go into studying medicine, a significant percentage, you know, over 60%, I believe this is, just a little shy of 60%, go into primary care. And primary care is really, primary care really is the one that has the biggest impact in urban communities. And that's where the need is.
First point of contact in primary care.
I mean, you know, they're not going to, you know, dermatologists at a large scale in urban communities, right? Some do. But my point is primary care is really the big one. And so in medicine, there's lots of initiatives to pull in more people of color, and they'll help take care of tuition costs as well. Loan forgiveness programs for those going into primary care, because they know that that's the way in which we're going to really reach the people and have the biggest impact. So yeah, there's a lot of soldiers out there. There's a lot of we just need to keep pushing and doing more. There's a lot of organizations I would love to mention that support kids. So even at the let's talk about let's go down from college experiences. Even
like high school internship or
high school programs, the STEM programs, all throughout New York State.
Career exploration programs, maybe.
For sure. So it's not always just about the sciences, but also mathematics, engineering, right? Also included in the STEM programs that are free all throughout New York State. So really, in the book and definitely in the next one, I list those out so that parents and teachers know, like, yes, you can refer the kids to go there. It's free. It's not just for brainiacs. And I make that point in the second book. But going beyond that, when a person's at the college level, there's also programs called MAPS. And
looks like that's a deeper thing to be discussing.
Yeah.
Could we open up and dig into that after the break?
I would love to.
Awesome.
Thanks for asking. Yeah.
Okay, so we'll be back to dig in further into the implications of encouraging students from a young age to go into medicine.
Observe a domesticated human family in their natural habitat, known to their species as the backyard.
Hey, you think I should light it now?
I think it's good.
Yeah?
Oh dear, someone is about to burn a pile of debris that's too tall, which can start a wildfire. Wait, could it be? Blimey, it is.
It's Smokey.
It's Smokey Bear. What a legend.
What's he
Hey,
doing
it's
here?
Smokey. Sorry, it was too high. Right.
Watch as he astutely ensures that there's no wind, and how he removes some of the debris to create a smaller, safer burning pile.
No, you
me to
said,
make it bigger.
no, you said make it bigger, baby. The bigger, the better.
Take note of
Right.
our fearless
I get it.
furry friend here, humans.
I appreciate it. Fist bump.
Watching you.
Smokey's done it again.
Bye, Smokey.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
Kids!
I don't want to talk about it.
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 Families don't have to talk about everything, but they should talk about how to plan for an emergency.
Kids, you all right?
This family's prepared. Get tips and resources to make your family's emergency plan. Go to nyc.gov/readyny or call 311 for more information.
Hi, and welcome back to InformNation, where knowledge is not information until it's shared. I'm your host, Aixa Rodriguez, and we're digging into the deep understanding of what we need to do to encourage representation in the medical fields and STEM fields with Mr. Obed Figueroa, who is the author of Marcus Learns About different types of doctors. So in your book, you are showing a variety of specialties. But you were also just talking about not just college, but going into high school. This is really early, ahead of time. You were talking about laying seeds and foundations so that it's not something foreign for them. It's something possible they see themselves. And you also just mentioned something about the highest point of representation is at the first stage of care, which would be your primary care doctor. And you also mentioned the second book that you're having planning. So if you could share something about any of those.
So the second one is just going a little deeper, and it's for junior high school readers, reading about Marcus's experience as a high schooler. And I really think, you know, your audience and you're just going to love it when you see it. It's already written and approved by the publisher. We just wanted to get this one out first. So it's heavier content because, again, the reader is older.
Reading level would be different.
Yeah, so less illustration and heavier content. But really what I'm doing is, again, showing how a young person can navigate within their community. I did not want to create a narrative of showing that there is he's being saved by some other group other than himself.
No savior myths
right?
here, no.
So I didn't want to do that, and I wanted to show really the assets of one's community. Like, where do they go within?
The setting of this is the Bronx. And so the next book would also, setting will also be the Bronx.
Yeah, the Bronx. I'm not going to isolate them to only be there, but my point is I wanted to show a community you don't have to leave where you're from. You know, there are resources, rich resources where you are.
You can be a professional where you're at.
Oh,
right?
totally. So I wanted to, your representation can be found there, your resources, your mentorship, your educational opportunities can all be found where you are, right? But it's, you know, what happens is those that don't get the mentorship sometimes stray out and go somewhere else because, or they're not getting the love where they are, right? So if I'm not getting it where I'm at, then I got to find it somewhere else. And so you wind up going to other places or leaving your community. So I really was intentional about that. And what we were talking about before was that, you know, all these different levels where interaction could happen or engagement to inspire. And so at the college level, there's also mentorship there. So going beyond the advisors that they have, the college programs have MAPS programs that are science-based that specifically target students that are going into the sciences, creating workshops and, you know, giving them resources and bringing in guest speakers, and I happen to participate in that. So that's MAPS. MAPS is under a larger organization called SNMA. Can't talk about them enough, can't brag about them enough, because I'd mop the floor for them and they know that. But they provide support to medical students of color.
And what type of support is that? Like,
so again, conferences, you know, national, regional,
so
and national.
networking and professional development type thing.
Totally, for the pre-med student in, you know, studying sciences, right? So, and then there's MAPS that is a step, you know, back. And then, of course, obviously, there's the higher one, the professional, and there's, you know, associations for them as well. Because they know that the conversation...
All along the continuum, having places to
so
feel
most
connected.
Most often, if you're engaged in the sciences, you may know this. You know, if not, I make sure that I always speak about it so that the professional knows, the college student knows, the high schooler knows how to be connected, because it's important. You get into these spaces and you see it's competitive. You get into these spaces and you see you're the only one sometimes. And
you need a crew. You need to feel secure and be like you belong.
You totally do. I believe there's a paper written on imposter syndrome, right? If anyone
even at the highest level of education.
Could
you define imposter syndrome for those who may not have understand it?
So I know if they don't understand that term, they understand the experience, right, that we can relate to. You know, being a first college graduate, you know, going into a space that's unfamiliar, even though you have the education, you still feel like, are they accepting of me? Do they get that I didn't come through affirmative action, right? We are the benefits of, and thank God that we are.
But the assumptions that people have that you didn't have any merit, that you got there, you know.
Oh my word!
You got a coupon.
I tell you.
Got ahead.
And we you know, the non-traditional, still we walk with this, right? It's almost like a person that's obese and then they lose a lot of weight. People don't get it, that they still feel heavy in their head, right? Even though they lost all the weight, now they're a size 2, 3, or 4, they still feel the 10 in their head. So I draw that as a comparison so people can understand. You know, we, you know, didn't, for those, because not all of us walk this particular walk, right? For those that are non-traditional first gen, you know, you're the first. You're figuring out, you're growing as a person, as a professional, and you still feel like you know, even though you have all this knowledge and degrees, you know, you still feel like, you know, do they get me? Do they see me? I have all these
Do I belong?
publications. Yeah. Do I have all these, a listing of long publications, and then we also have the other side, the flip side of that, right? Now, person of color, professional, you have all the accolades. Now, how do they see me? Some will see you or misperceive that you know, what was that walk? Some may feel threatened. So it's like, you know, how am I walking this space? You know,
Especially if those people have imposter syndrome of their own. Who are hiding some inadequacies, and they see a person of color coming in.
It's sad. It's sad that we have to think about these things. I wish I could just walk in a room and not have that thought, because it's a shame. I want you to see me for what I bring to the table, what I have to offer. Don't see me as the individual, but what I do, and why I do. I want you to feel me. Don't get it twisted any other way, you know. But yeah.
Even at a young age, people start to understand that they're going to be categorized or placed in a certain area, and start to have narratives in their own head about what is possible in their lives. Sometimes it's the voice of a parent or a voice of people in their community that make them feel like they have limits, or they have some ways that they need to be kind of brought into, like a cattle drive, like guided into certain places, and no, you can't dream that big. So your book does a lot for putting it on his head. The character of the grandma, who is actually saying, oh, you're interested in this? Let me find a way. So that appealed to me, the idea of the role of parents in helping their kids grow and have a concept of themselves outside of the limits that they may perceive.
I was very intentional with that. I wanted it to make it non-traditional context, urban context in particular, and someone that did not have all the answers herself, right? Because we need to be humble about that. Like, you don't have to have all the answers. I tell my kids that as well, you know, but we can figure it out. We can figure it out, and she does that. She takes them to the community, and they figure it out with help. With help. So very intentional.
Yeah. We don't often see how parents can actually support kids in making these steps towards their careers. Most of the time, the career is presented as this is what it's about, and that's it. What do you think the role is for family members who are trying to help kids have a concept of their possibility and guide them, like through middle school choice or high school choice, so they can eventually get into the professions? How can we support parents in being able to do what she was doing, which is find the resources that are located in the neighborhood and show the kid it's possible?
We have to have them engaged in conversation, right? Because now we're asking them to be brave and step outside their comfort zone. And I get it. Like, anyone who's first gen gets it that their parents are unfamiliar. They're scared, you know? I can't even fathom what they went through as young people and the psychological damage that was done, in particular in the US, right? There's lots of literature on that. So when we think about the judgment on our parents and our ancestors, we really need to think about their experiences and what got them to that point, and have empathy, right? And then work through that stuff, right? Because we were all annoyed and pissed and like, come on, why you didn't get it, or why they didn't. I get it. I totally do. So my point is that we need to recognize that and, you know, stop being angry as much about that, and think about how do we shift it
To possibilities and options.
Yeah. So we have to, particularly for the older generation, it's exposure. It's exposure. Just like the young people, I'd say the same for older people. And if we're in education, we need to be pulling these parents together, as I have in Brooklyn. Let's talk. You need to understand this dynamic, how I can help you navigate it, rather than making it so intimidating that they're scared to even come in. You're gonna misperceive because I don't speak perfect English. You're gonna think I'm ignorant. You're gonna think because I don't know that I'm dumb. Who wants to go into that?
The parents are having imposter syndrome as
right.
well.
Well, this is what I'm referring to.
Not feeling comfortable at all.
Yeah, this is what I'm referring to, the parents.
So you're already doing the second book in your head, and it's already coming out. You have the draft ready for junior high school. Is there also a parent guide who's in doing this, or in the second book?
In the second one, already written and approved, right? So it's just waiting for production. I don't have one for parents, but I will say that in the second one, because it's an older reader, I do have more dynamics that are at play, so that you could see how this is actually the grandmother with the grandchild, how she is interacting with him and he with her, how community members are interacting with the
So it's a higher
character.
level of it's not just this one to relate to, but okay.
Yeah,
So
internships, all
I'm
that.
impressed by this. I don't have anything like this in my library for my students in my classroom. But just one last question before we wrap up. Being that you finally got to this point, what is your advice for and someone who wants to add to this body of books and wants to become an author? What advice would you have for people who are starting that?
Thanks for asking that. I really would I want to affect multiple levels. I want to affect the young person who sees me and says, wow, I want to do that, right? I want to encourage him to be brave, to thicken your skin, because you're going to have a lot of critiques from educators, from parents that don't understand why you're just not picking up a ball and playing basketball. I want them to stay focused and brave and explore. And I know that also young people get the red marks on the paper, with the corrections, and sometimes that just, as it with me, it does.
So even the book process has that feedback process.
So even when you're getting the red marks, correct this, correct that. I went through an experience, and young people should as well, as free writing. Just let it go. Just get it out of your head. Don't worry about the periods and commas for the first draft. Just get it out, because that's where your creativity comes out. Second phase is going at it, and you must.
Great advice. The free writing is
must.
definitely an important way of getting kids to start writing. Thank you so much for coming
it's a pleasure.
and sharing your
It's a pleasure.
book, which is going to be a great addition to anybody's library.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Honor.
Lovely to speak with you.
Honor.
And thank you for watching InformNation, where knowledge is not information until it's shared. We've been speaking with Obed Figueroa, who is author of Marcus Learns About Different Types of Doctors. And thank you for watching. See you next time.
Mom, I got it. What are you doing in there?
I got stuff.
Are you a dog?
I wouldn't do that. Have you seen the pliers? Where'd you find those?
It's not your birthday.
Sorry.
Bye, Grandpa.
Bye, Grandpa.
Take care of yourself.
What are you doing? What are you looking for?
Roll over. Chance high five. All right. When you adopt a shelter pet, you discover all the things that make them unique. And your mother and... I am totally a hot person. Right, guys? Thanks for being honest. They're a little bit of a lot of things, but they're all pure love. Adopt pure love at theshelterpetproject.org.
Touchdown! Did you see that? Whoa, we scored? Yeah, we scored. We're going to the playoffs.